Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 12, Episode 91. He is not Dave Bryan. He is Josh Carney. Alex Kozora here, SteelersDepot.com. Appreciate you guys being here for this Wednesday episode. As you guys know by now, Dave is out of town for the next 10 or so days on a much-deserved, long overdue vacation trip around the West Coast with him and his wife. And so Josh will be filling in with me in the interim. We're recording this on Tuesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. So if any news breaks from Tuesday night to the time you listen to this, sorry we didn't get a chance to cover it, but that's the way we're doing things until Dave gets back. So Josh, you've heard him before, heard him from the Shrine Bowl, covered that, did a great job. You can follow him on Twitter at by Josh Carney, and be sure to follow him there. And it looks like, according to your Twitter timeline, you're almost at 100,000 tweets, Josh. So congrats on almost getting to that milestone, we'll call it.
That makes me feel bad in a sense. I'm on Twitter too much. Holy crap.
Yeah, you and me both. I think I passed that a long time ago, and Dave is, I think, at 1 million. It feels like maybe he's almost there. For sure. So a couple of things we want to talk about today, probably a bit shorter show overall. And I'm not sure if we're going to have one for Friday. Maybe we'll come back Friday if any other news breaks from here till now. But I wanted to talk with Josh tonight because Pittsburgh has made, in addition to their coaching staff, hiring Pat Meyer to be their new offensive line coach to replace Adrian Klemm and Chris Morgan. Klemm leaving for Oregon before the 2021 season ended. And then Morgan took the job in Chicago during the Senior Bowl, actually, is when that news ended up breaking. And so Pat Meyer had served as the Carolina Panthers offensive line coach the past 2 years under Matt Rule. He was let go earlier in the offseason, the second ex-Panthers coach to come over from that staff, joining wide receivers coach Frisbee Jackson. So I know this is not the name Steelers fans wanted to hear. Josh, everyone wanted Doug Marrone, who's with the Saints, and Mike Munchak, who is still not with a team. I've heard that he may not coach this year and just kind of go like Vic Fangio and just spend time with his family and take a year off. And so we'll see what happens there. But Pat Meyer, a name I think Steelers fans are trying to get familiar with, Josh.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people reacting on Twitter like they knew the guy. I think you and I didn't really even know the guy until his name hit the wire there this morning. But he has an interesting resume. I mean, he's been all over the league: Bears, Bills, Chargers, Panthers. He's been part of some decent offensive lines, some successful run games, but certainly not the name that I think anyone, even within the Steelers Depot family, had targeted. Obviously, Carolina kind of cleaned house down there under Matt Rule, but Pat Meyer comes in. He's experienced. He has a ton of experience. He had a stop in Memphis. Same time Keith Butler was there. He was with the Chargers. The same time Alfredo Roberts was the running backs coach. Meyer was the offensive line coach and run game coordinator there. And then obviously he spent time in Carolina with Frisbee Jackson, who's the new Steelers receiver. So some connections there. But I'm kind of still trying to learn a little bit about Pat Meyer before I come out and say I like this or I don't like this.
Mm-hmm. I'm still working on an article right now, but it'll be available and open for people to read Wednesday morning by the time people listen to this. There's a coaching clinic he did 2 years ago while after just getting hired to be the Panthers O-line coach. And it's 71 minutes about him and pass pro and just breaking down the fundamentals of pass protection. And so there's not a whole lot there for run blocking, but it's a pretty deep dive in the pass pro. And so I encourage you guys to check that out. There's clips, there's GIFs, there's audio from the clinic. And I think that'll probably give an idea of some of the things he'll be bringing to the table, because that's ultimately most important. What is he going to be coaching? What are his principles? And that's going to be the way we can evaluate A, who the team might bring in, and B, the style of play, at least in pass protection. I think you're right, Josh. I think it's a great point about the Chargers in that relationship with Alfredo Roberts, that running back coach with the O-line coach, run game coordinator. That's such a tight relationship. So those guys, I'm sure, know each other extremely well. And he's also got NC State on his resume. Not that he was there at the same time. He was there before Faulkner and Jackson in Canada, but that's apparently now a requirement on the resume. This guy's got a pretty diverse background. He's been a strength and conditioning coach, O-line coach, offensive coordinator, tight ends coach, run game coordinator. And so he's viewed the lens of offense and offensive line play through a lot of different perspectives. I think that doesn't make you a great coach automatically, but I think it opens that window that's important to just understanding a different perspective, and it'll kind of help you when you're the O-line coach and presumably in Pittsburgh, the run game coordinator.
Yeah, and it also helps too. I mean, part of the reason he probably lost his job in Carolina was the offensive line there took a step back from 2020, but the Panthers also used 14 different starting lineup combinations in the trenches last season. Pittsburgh, by comparison, used 7. I saw that David put that out on Twitter Tuesday afternoon. But he seems to work well with younger linemen in terms of versatility and all that. He seems to really handle himself well when things are kind of falling down around him. You look back at some of those Chargers offensive lines, they dealt with a ton of injuries, had guys moving in and out. Carolina last year, I know the numbers weren't there, but a guy that I circled right away was Taylor Moton, who 2 career years under Pat Meyer. I had some Panthers reporters say, his development was tied more to John Matsko, the assistant offensive line coach, but I don't think it's a coincidence that Pat Meyer came in there and Taylor Moton took a step forward both years just in terms of pass protection overall and really tapped into some of those traits that he has. But he's bounced around a lot. It's going to be interesting to see what he can do in Pittsburgh, but he seems to be the guy to bring in, on the ground level, work with these younger guys and start to build an offensive line. But you made a good point Tuesday on Twitter as well. Like, it doesn't matter who the coach is if you don't invest in the trenches. You show me a good coach, I'll show you a really good offensive line with a ton of talent. You show me a bad coach, it's probably a poor offensive line from a talent standpoint. And I think that's what you saw in Pittsburgh last year. That might be what you saw some in Carolina as well. I have not watched a lot of Panthers tape at this point, but it doesn't matter who the coach is along the offensive line for the Steelers. It doesn't really matter who the assistant offensive line coach is. They have to invest up front.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing. You got to bring in some high quality talent. You didn't go that route last year. If you want radical change, you got to make some radical, changes in terms of drafting guys for agency. They got some money to spend. And so you're right about that. And you made the good point about, the offensive line injuries in San Diego and Los Angeles and in Carolina. And that's what makes those guys tough to judge because there are so many variables: quarterback play, offensive coordinator, overall style, injuries. What your front office does, who they bring in, who they don't bring in, how much they invest in the position, that it's really hard to look at a PFF grade or, just overall yards per carry and say that's a pass fail. And actually, it's funny, in Carolina, I think at one point, maybe earlier this year, it was Joe Brady and Pat Meyer that had an article or some commentary about we don't care what PFF says. They don't know what they're talking about and really push back hard on some of the criticisms they had gotten. So, PFF's one of those things where you use it when you support your argument. PFF doesn't like Minka Fitzpatrick. They don't like TJ Watt. So Steelers fans really get on those guys for that. But whenever it's numbers that kind of set their own potential narrative, then they really lean on those things. And I get it's hard to evaluate O-line coaches. So you try to look at some of those grades that are out there. But, I think you look at those numbers, but they don't really tell you the whole story because they don't really factor the injuries and other things.
Yeah, and I think, too, PFF has admitted in the past that they're not well-versed in offensive line play. So they go in with a set of grades, and they try and work off that, but they don't really know exactly what's happening. They've brought in former offensive linemen here and there. I know Jeff Schwartz was working with them to kind of try and help with the grading along the offensive line. But, yeah, I saw far too often today, other media members, fans citing those PFF numbers. Look, Carolina was 31st in offensive line grading last year. They also had 3 different starting quarterbacks. Their all-pro caliber running back missed all but 2 games. And as I mentioned earlier, 14 starting combinations along the offensive line. There has to be context with those numbers.
Yeah, there does. And that's what makes, and to be fair, we can't always evaluate what every lineman's doing on a particular play. So we're not trying to be, holier than thou, but that just, you can't look at those numbers and make any, definitive conclusions based off of that. In the article I have on Steelers Depot this morning, it's a real long article. I'm not going to be able to summarize everything here in just our conversation, and there's a lot of photos and stuff. It'll paint a better picture than what my words are able to. One thing that Meyer seems to be a big fan of is length. It was a Senior Bowl interview he did last year with Riot Report, Panthers blog, it appears, and they asked with Meyer, what you look for in offensive lineman, and he said, quote, typically when I look at it, I have traits that I look for in linemen, measurables, how long are they? Does this guy have huge length? Does he have 35-inch arms? And this guy have 33-inch arms? Look at the measurables, but then you look at the traits and try to find if he can anchor down. Is this guy powerful? How does this guy stand? What's his lower body stiffness like? And so he seems to like longer guys, bigger guys, heavier guys. And he mentioned in that clinic a lot of Russell Okung. And you talked about that, Josh, as well. Kind of that's the body type he seems to gravitate towards.
Yeah, Russell Okung followed him from Los Angeles to Carolina, said specifically when he signed with the Panthers, I think it was 2 years ago. He didn't play last year, but 2 years ago, he left the Chargers to follow Pat Meyer. I just threw it out there. I mean, Russell Okung has been tied to the Steelers at times in the last few years, but I mean, at this point, that could be a flyer worth taking. But yeah, it's good to hear he values length at the position, because you can make up for a lot of mistakes with length along the offensive line. And feels like at times some of these Steelers offensive linemen have kind of suffered in that department.
Yeah, you see someone like Kendrick Green, his struggles, and obviously he's not going to be as long as a tackle like Okung. Now, we're just throwing that out there on Okung. Would he be in left tackle in Pittsburgh and Moore would go to right tackle? Where do you think that fit could be?
Yeah, I don't know. I would hate to move Dan Moore this early in his career, but I mean, if you could get a guy like Okung in here on a 1 or 2 year deal, I think you would have to flip Moore to right tackle and kind of solidify them both. But I just believe in Dan Moore quite a bit that I don't know that I want to shift him at this point. And I don't know that Russell Okung has ever played right tackle. So the fit might not make sense on paper, but it's the type of player Pat Meyer looks for. And obviously that player gravitates to him. So.
Yeah, and the other issues with Okung, and you're right, I think he's only played left tackle. He's going to be 34 in October, didn't play at all last year, played only 7 games in 2020, 6 games in 2019 with the Chargers and Coach Meyer, and so there's a health, age aspect that makes – what's that?
He only wants to be paid in Bitcoin, so I don't
right.
I don't know that the Steelers will do that. So
yeah, I don't know if Kevin Colbert knows what Bitcoin is. What crypto is. But so, yeah, I don't know if Okung fits. And I will say on the length comment, in terms of who's been drafted with the Chargers and Panthers under Meyer, not that Myers, has the say all on this, but I haven't seen a lot of guys with great length. They've kind of been average to below average guys. Deontay Brown, Forrest Lamp, Dan Feeney, Scott Quisenberry, even Brady Christensen, the tackle from BYU last year, only had 33 1/4 inch arms, which was pretty, small for his height. So maybe there isn't a direct 1-to-1 correlation there. And I will say, in terms of reading off of those names, like I said, Christensen, Deontay Brown, Forrest Lamp, Dan Feeney, Sam Tevy, Scott Quisenberry, and Trey Pipkins, generally speaking, those guys have not developed tremendously well. And so that is probably one concern with Meyer, is that some of those young guys, higher draft picks, haven't panned out probably the way those teams had hoped for.
Yeah, that is certainly a concern. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, it wasn't like he had world beaters in Los Angeles, and he certainly didn't have those type of guys in Carolina. But yeah, I want to give this guy a chance. I know you do too. He's got a good resume. For everything that I had read and heard today was that Matt Rule was very hands-on in Carolina the last 2 years and kind of stepped on Meyer's toes at times. I mean, granted, he's the head coach. He can do that. He can step in wherever he feels he needs to. But the general understanding I got was that Matt Rule was pushing more for versatility rather than letting guys learn and grow in certain positions. And that kind of threw Meyer off in a sense. Hopefully the Steelers kind of let Meyer do his thing. I know that they do value positional versatility, but you got to let guys stay in a position and really grow and figure it out and not throw too much on their plates. And it feels like that's what happened in Carolina last year.
Yeah, I think that's well said. In the article, again, this is just focused on pass pro, so there wasn't much discussion on the run game, but Meyer's whole tenet was to be aggressive in pass protection. Like, he wants these guys to attack. The title of my article is "Bring the Fight to Them," and meaning that offensive linemen are not going to give ground. They're going to attack and be aggressive as many times as they can be. Not in every situation, but he wants those guys to be aggressive. Let me find the comment here, if I can find it somewhere in my article about what he said in pass protection. He said, quote, "I think the main thing in pass protection is you have to make first significant contact always." So his big coaching point, I read this in other interviews and things like that, is that he wants to make first significant contact in pass protection. He wants these guys to be super aggressive overall. Also, he teaches independent hands. So not a lot of two-hand punching. It's a lot of high-low punching. So you don't get both hands knocked down by a defensive lineman. And so that's kind of become more of a popular idea for offensive line coaches, is to do independent hands as opposed to the two-hand punch. It's kind of a bit more old school. So I think overall, my impression of Meyer in pass pro is that he doesn't have as many rules for offensive linemen. He allows these guys to play with more freedom and kind of do what they have to do to get the job done. For example, they'll drill this in practice. You'll probably see it in training camp this year, Josh, is that those sometimes if you get beat badly, he permits and teaches these guys to spin around and like butt block people, basically, and box these guys out. And so it's going to look funny sometimes, but he allows these guys to do whatever it takes to keep the quarterback clean. And so in camp this year, and probably in games, you will see times where guys will spin around or butt block them because that's what they're being told to do. So it's a little more. There's a structure to it, but I think it seems like Meyer's giving these guys more freedom to do whatever they have to do to get the job done.
Yeah, and it feels too like he's okay with quick sets in the passing game as well, which I'd like to see a little more of, especially against some of these better pass rushers. Just kind of get your hands out on them and win early. As you mentioned in that story, bring the fight to them. I don't feel like we saw a ton of quick sets in recent years. It was kind of that giving ground and kind of letting them come to you. I'm interested to see how he kind of tries to transform this offensive line room. I know that the Steelers hopefully are going to invest, whether it's free agency or the draft. They've got to bring guys in here with talent. And I want to see what he does with some of the young guys. I still have high hopes for Dan Moore. I haven't given up entirely on Kendrick Green. I do wonder if that bring the fight to them mentality helps Kendrick Green with his brawler mentality.
I think it could, but his hand use and technique needs to improve because Meyer really teaches, good hand use and hand fighting. And I'm sure every line coach does, but he really seems to emphasize that, really technically sound. And Green was not last year. And then Dan Moore, the question with him is, will he have that anchor? He struggled with bull rushes last year, and so he'll have to improve that, and that'll be the big thing I think Meyer's going to work with him on, is just getting stronger overall. You're right. They didn't do a lot of jump sets last year. Dan Moore did a lot of vertical setting last season. Villanueva would jump set you because he was so big and long. He got arms on you, and he would win that fight really quickly. And so Meyer calls that chase down, where he's going to be really aggressive, attack, and run to the defender. And he says, close down the space on that guy, get hands, and again, make first significant contact. And so I think you will see more variety of sets, more aggression in pass sets, not giving up ground in most situations, and an overall just more aggressive mentality, even in pass pro.
Yeah, like I said, I'm interested to see just what he can do. And I think it will be strange to see some of those losses early in training camp where guys are blocking defenders with their butts, but that's how it's taught at this point. Try and win the rep any way possible. But I just want to caution people, yes, this isn't Mike Munchak. If you squint hard enough, he kind of looks like him in his team photo, but the expectations for Munchak obviously did not come to fruition. So we'll see what Pat Meyer can do. And hopefully Pittsburgh takes a step in the right direction along the offensive line, because it's been a lot of changes in recent years.
Right. And while Munchak is a great coach, and I would have loved to have him, and I would have been like the marquee A+ hire. I mean, Pittsburgh, was able to give him a bunch of talent, a lot of high draft picks, and, Pouncey, DeCastro, Marcus Gilbert, guys like that. And that certainly, as you said, makes a coach look a lot better. And so that still has to be the overall goal and focus. A couple free agents from Carolina names to watch, because as you said, Okung followed Meyer to Carolina. John Miller, their guard, he's a free agent. Michael Schofield's kind of been a versatile guy. I think he was with Meyer both with the Chargers and the Panthers, I want to say. And so does that guy continue to follow Meyer? He's older. He's 32 years old. And Miller has struggled, but just a couple names to potentially watch. Although if you're going to sign John Miller, you might as well just re-sign Trai Turner, unless the money's just far too much, maybe.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there.
So, that's the hire on Pat Meyer, as you said, touched on it. I expect this team to hire an assistant offensive line coach. They've had two for almost a decade. Sean Surratt. Really, I think it was Surratt with Bicknell was the first time they were.
Yes.
He wasn't the official assistant offensive line coach. He was an offensive assistant, but he really worked with the offensive lineman. And then it was Surratt and Munchak, and they've kind of carried that through with Surratt and Clem, and then Clem and Morgan. And so I would expect an assistant to come in at some point, unless Meyer just wants to really do it his way. Do you know if Meyer had an assistant in Carolina?
Yeah, John Matsko.
You didn't mention that.
Was his assistant there for the 2 years. So I did not see if he had an assistant in Los Angeles. I was not able to find that, but seems like him and Matsko worked pretty well. But it sounds like the Panthers are retaining Matsko.
Okay, I was going to ask you what's going to happen with Matsko. Is he getting elevated to?
It sounds like it. They haven't made an official announcement, but just some of the Panthers beat reporters I've talked to, it sounds like he's going to be sticking around.
Okay, so yeah, check out the article, Steelers Depot on Pat Meyer. We'll try to learn more, but I think it's a bit of a read, but I think it'll at least give some information on Meyer. My overall takeaway in the article was that, and this is maybe a cop-out, I called it an average hire. I think
it's fair. I think saying it's an average hire is very fair.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like this is the best offensive line coach in the world or anything like that. I don't think he's as bad, but the biggest worry I have is that some of these young guys drafted under his watch did not develop the way, and maybe that's just because the guy was wrong and the process was wrong. He's not picking those guys his own, but that is a concern. Like I said, Forrest Lamp, first round pick, dude didn't really do much. Didn't live up to that billing, and so there's a concern. I guess that's my biggest concern with Pat Meyer. Did you have any thoughts about the Frisbee Jackson hire? I know that happened the other day, but do you have any? It was kind of a weird situation.
That was another stunning one because I had totally spaced. I thought Ike Hilliard was still going to be around. It's hard to believe that 2 years went by, but yeah, typically the Steelers give assistants or positional coaches 2 years and coordinators 3-year contracts. And it was very strange that they never announced that they didn't renew his deal. I know that that's typical Steeler practice, but I wish for our sake here on the media side that they announced, hey, we didn't renew this guy or we're not extending a contract offer. But Frisbee Jackson, I mean, at this point, if you want to be a Steelers coach, younger listeners that want to get into football, make sure you make stops at Memphis and NC State, and you have a really good shot at getting hired.
Yeah, it is weird to see all the connections there with Jackson, Canada, Eddie Faulkner all coaching together at the same time at NC State. Does that speak anything to you? Or do you think it's just pure coincidence or continuity's sake? What do you think?
I think it tells me Jacoby Brissett's going to be a Steeler.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how I totally feel about that, but yeah, they were all on staff when Brissett was there. If I remember correctly, I do think it's continuity as well. They have familiarity working in a Matt Canada system for better or worse. And the Steelers like that continuity. They like to target those types of guys, so it makes a smooth transition. I don't have many thoughts overall on Frisbee Jackson. I just know that DJ Moore always praised him when asked about his development, and obviously Moore took a significant step forward, especially as a yards after catch guy. So hopefully that's what Frisbee Jackson can kind of bring to this room, because aside from Deontay Johnson, and assuming JuJu Smith-Schuster leaves, Steelers won't really have anyone that's a yak guy at the position.
Yeah, it's hard to get a good feel for Jackson. Seems to have a pretty similar resume to Ike Hilliard, but I mentioned with Dave on Monday's show that I think Jackson's former quarterback background is going to help kind of, again, give that different perspective, the way that Meyer has different perspective. So maybe that's one other common theme, guys that weren't always just a wide receivers coach their entire, career, or just an offensive line coach. There is a different perspective there that I think will help, especially a young offense, young guys hopefully grow and see the game a bit better.
Yeah, and I think it can only benefit Chase Claypool to kind of have that former quarterback on the staff, because Chase felt lost last year when it came to the checks and the hot reads and all that. So maybe having the game explained to him from a different standpoint. Obviously, he had that explanation from Mike Hilliard as a receiver, but having that different perspective, like you mentioned, hopefully could help Chase Claypool kind of develop his football IQ a little bit more and situational awareness. But it's not a, oh, this is an awesome hire, or wow, this is a terrible decision by the Steelers. It's an average one. He's coming from a team that struggled offensively, was cleaning house, but he had success with that receiving room. So I'm excited to see what he can do in Pittsburgh, and hopefully the Steelers invest like the Panthers did in the years that Jackson was there at receiver.
Yeah, well said, Josh. So again, check out the article Steelers Depot to learn more about Pat Meyer. Josh, switching gears here to the draft. It is mock draft season. It feels like every day I see 14 of them posted online somewhere. And a common theme in these mock drafts, and I assume it'll continue, is the idea of Pittsburgh trading up for a quarterback. And again, these are just mock drafts, just idle speculation, but PFF in their latest mock draft had Pittsburgh going from 20 to 9 to take Malik Willis. And then in Chad Reuter's 3-round mock draft on NFL.com, he had Pittsburgh going from 20 to 10 to take Sam Howell, of all people, the North Carolina quarterback. So, I don't want to get in the weeds about those specific trades, but just the overall idea of trading up for a quarterback. I know it's a broad question asked, still pretty early, Josh, but are you in favor of that idea?
Not at this moment, just because I know that if you're going to trade up into the top 10, especially for a quarterback, and a team knows you're going up for a quarterback, it always feels like the package that you have to give away is that much higher. If they could give away a package like they did for Devin Bush a few years ago, which was, I think, a second and a third, and obviously their first that year to move up to 10, I would be okay with it. But I definitely don't want to see the Steelers move up into the top 10 for Sam Howell, of all people. Now, if it were for Malik Willis, I'm all for it. I've been pretty vocal that I would bet on that guy's traits every day and twice on Sunday. Sam Howell, I feel like he could be a guy that would be available at 20, and you just sit there, and if you like him, you take him. But whatever they decide, I just hope that they are, convinced of it and they're aggressive and they go for their guy, because if you identify a quarterback that you like, you just need to go and get him. Now, I'm not saying trade up to number 1 at this point and trade your entire draft and future drafts to do that. But if you see the board fall in a certain way, I hope that they're aggressive like they were in moving up for a linebacker, because quarterback is the most important position in football and in all of sports. And I just don't want to see this team, just continue to punt on quarterback and try and build up the rest of the roster. And then next thing you know, they can't find the guy. So I think we're going to continue to see more and more trade up mentions for the Steelers when it comes to quarterback. But at this point, knowing what their draft looks like in terms of picks for 2022, I say just sit there and see how the board falls, because I don't think any of these quarterbacks are really going to cause teams to jump into the top 10 to get them at this point. Right. It's not like last year's class whatsoever.
But there is always that scarcity at the position, and that causes teams to maybe make some reckless decisions. Do you, and if you don't have the answer to this, that's fine because it is so early. Do you have a list of quarterbacks you would be willing to trade up for to some degree? Malik Willis sounds like he's one of those guys. Is there anyone else? Is it Pickett, or is it just Malik Willis?
I think right now it's just Malik Willis based on his traits. He's just watching that AFC Championship game the divisional round, the Bills and Chiefs, watching Mahomes and Allen duel it out. It's like, I need a quarterback with that type of arm and that type of mobility. Now, Willis certainly will need time to develop. I'm not saying he's going to come in immediately and be a Mahomes or a Josh Allen, but you have to bet on traits, and he's the only guy that I would risk significant draft capital to move up for. I know that on previous podcasts, I think you've mentioned Kenny Pickett is the safest. Now, if you're a team that you feel can contend right away and you need a quarterback, I would probably move up for Pickett, but I don't think that that's the Steelers at this point. A team that would make sense that could contend right now and needs a quarterback could be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that would be a significant jump up for a guy like Pickett. But yeah, right now, Alex, it's really just Malik Willis for me, and I would let the rest of the board fall as it may.
Yeah, I can definitely see that with Willis because of the upside, the potential reward there. I don't know if the other quarterbacks quite offer that. I don't know if I call Pickett the safest. I usually try to stay away from that term because it sounds nice on paper, but it doesn't usually work out. Like I remember Aaron Curry was always like the safest guy. Yeah. Like he wasn't the safest player. So safest, I think, is a dubious term when it comes to the draft. But I think.
Maybe it wasn't. Maybe you didn't say safest. Maybe it was like most pro ready at this point.
Yeah, I think that
makes sense. I think he could step in right away.
Right. I think to some degree, if you had to choose the quarterback with kind of the highest floor, it would be him. But again,
that's what it was. It was highest floor. That's what it was.
I still am afraid to say those words too strongly because they don't really mean a whole lot. And we've had those conversations before with other guys, other positions, and it doesn't work out. So. Again, I don't mean to grill you here on trade-up possibilities, but how much of a move up would you be willing to make for Willis? You said not number 1, obviously, but is it like, would you go the Devin Bush route and move up 10 spots?
I would feel very comfortable jumping to 10 with the Jets. It all depends, I guess, on the read I got with the Panthers. I know that there's that rumor that Carolina is very interested in, not to make this the Panthers Depot podcast, but Carolina's very interested in Pickett and Willis, and obviously Matt Rule and David Tepper have good relationships with Kenny Pickett, but are they going to go Pickett or are they going to go Willis? So if I felt the need to get to 5, and I can't remember off the top of my head who picks 5 at this point, but I think 5 would be the highest I would feel comfortable moving up to, just to get ahead of the Panthers. But at 10, if the Jets called me, and Willis and Pickett were still on the board, I would be thrilled to move up that high.
Yeah, I wonder who Carolina would take. Who would Ben McAdoo work with? Would he work with Malik Willis? Well, I don't know.
I forgot Ben McAdoo was the OC there.
Yeah, that was the sexy hire they were supposed to make to replace Joe Brady. And
that's right.
Apparently the guy. Very strange. Again, I don't make this Panthers Depot, but my overall philosophy: if you find your guy, regardless of who that is, regardless whether or not I like him, you be aggressive for that guy, because I doubt in this class there's going to be like 2-3 guys you love. It'll be 1. Maybe 2 guys you deem as a franchise guy. And so with that scarcity, you're going to have to be aggressive. And there's always a line and a point where you say it's too much, but it'll be a pretty high bar for me, because if you truly think he's your guy, then nothing else matters, because that's your guy and that's going to shape your franchise in a positive direction for the next 10, 15 years. Now, is that guaranteed? No, this guy could bust out and you could be screwed, but that's the risk you take when it comes to a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would rather be aggressive and chasing at that position than sitting back and hoping the Mason Rudolphs of the world, fall to us and we can develop them 3-4 years down the line. And just seeing the coverage that you guys did from the Senior Bowl, I mean, it looks like, Cupid shot Mike Tomlin with an arrow when it comes to Malik Willis at this point. Like, he is head over heels with that guy. I know Colbert is very high on Sam Howell, and it sounds like Brandon Hunt's high on Desmond Ridder, but man, Malik Willis, that just feels like the shiny new toy that you need in today's game. And if that's the guy, move heaven and earth to go get him.
Yeah, I can definitely see the allure with Willis for sure. The upside, the traits, the tools, had a good week at the Senior Bowl. But in terms of those reports, because everyone said a different thing. Someone said it's Pickett they love. Someone said it's Willis they love. I heard Matt Corral they love. He wasn't even there. So again, the pro day circuit's going to tell us a lot, and I imagine they're going to be at a lot of these places. So maybe it won't tell us a whole lot actually, but obviously if they don't go to Liberty, that'd be a pretty big sign. But I assume they will be at Liberty and the other quarterback heavy pro days. Yeah,
it'll be very interesting to see too, because I think there are 3 pro days on March 24th that are all at the same time.
Yeah, they changed that. They changed the schedule to break that up. Yeah, I don't know the exact schedule, but yeah, that was a conflict with.
Yeah, I was going to say that could be a disaster, because how did the Steelers break that up? But yeah, it'll be very telling where Tomlin and Colbert head to for pro day circuits, and chances are Mike Tomlin will be right near the camera and right behind the quarterback when it comes to that pro day. So it'll be very interesting. It feels weird that the Steelers are at this point within the franchise looking for a new guy. I mean, we just went through 18 years of Ben Roethlisberger, so this feels like uncharted water, not only for the fan base, but for us here at Steelers Depot. It's exciting though.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it is uncharted territory. I mean, Mike Tomlin has never had to find a quarterback before, ever. Kevin Colbert did, but Mike Tomlin he came to Pittsburgh and Ben was there and he won a Super Bowl and that was your guy. So, I mean, it is brand new for him to find that quarterback, and it's just a whole new process. And even when Colbert found Ben in 2004, the game's changed so much. So the whole process, and obviously they study these guys, they draft Mason, so it's not like they haven't done their homework, but to actually do it and make that call is a whole new world.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be quite an interesting draft process for us here. So
yeah, and many more mock drafts to come because everyone loves to read.
Brace yourselves.
One other thing I wanted to talk about today in this episode, Josh, Dave Bryan wrote an article Tuesday evening, ESPN, specifically Jeremy Fowler had an article for best free agent fits for each team. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, actually was Fowler and Matt Bowen. They had 2 players pending free agents that were the best fits for Pittsburgh. One was quarterback Jameis Winston, the other cornerback Stephon Gilmore. And so Winston, Gilmore, the 2 names on their list for Pittsburgh. Again, this is not actual reporting. It's just off-season exercises, stuff like that. So just take that for what it's worth. But your thoughts on the idea of trying to connect Gilmore and Winston to Pittsburgh?
Winston makes a little bit of sense coming off the torn ACL. The Steelers are certainly searching for a veteran quarterback at this point, it feels like. But could he be cheap, especially considering the cap situation the Saints find themselves in at this point? That's intriguing. I know that he's most famous for his 30 by 30 year, 30 touchdowns, 30 picks, but he would make the offense more exciting. I think it would certainly take more shots downfield. That one intrigues me, but the Stephon Gilmore one just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think Dave kind of wrote about it as well. Gilmore's 32 years old, was just traded. I don't know. I don't quite agree with Bowen's scheme fit in a sense. That one just feels like that would be an overpay for him as well. A cornerback on the wrong side of 30, has aged rather quickly in the last few years. That's one I would certainly stay away from. I do think that they're going to sign a cornerback outside of one of Witherspoon or Hayden at this point. But I would stay away from Gilmore. That one does not excite me at this point.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of either name. And with Gilmore, you're right. You're going to let Joe Hayden, an aging cornerback, leave to bring in an aging cornerback. I think Gilmore's probably better than Hayden, but the overall principle and Gilmore's going to cost more doesn't make a lot of sense. Although I recognize the need to really find that shutdown cornerback because you're in an AFC North with Jamar Chase twice a year and some really good receivers overall in the AFC. And who knows the Browns are going to probably add significantly at receiver this offseason. So, is Cam Sutton a true number one corner? No. Is Witherspoon? I think there's some traits there, but
are you betting on that?
Yeah, you're betting on that. So I think you want to think about that at least pretty strongly. With Winston, I think he'll be cheaper, not because of the Saints cap situation, just because of the injuries coming off of. And cheap's a relative term when it comes to free agent quarterbacks. Those guys are never really truly cheap because they're a quarterback. But I think with Winston, I don't trust the decision making overall. I know it was better this year, but it's just that the turnovers are going to be a killer. You're going to want a quarterback who's going to manage the game, not hurt you, kind of like 2019, hopefully a bit more, productivity than that. But this is going to be a ball control, run the ball, good defense philosophy until they find that franchise guy. And you can't turn the football over. It's going to wreck that strategy. And then is he going to be healthy in the summer and in OTAs to really learn this offense? Is he going to be behind the eight ball? So I don't get on board Jameis Winston.
Yeah, maybe, what was it, a few years ago, it was rumored he was going to be a Steeler before signing with the Saints. It didn't make any sense then. I think it makes a little bit more sense now, but yeah, I don't know what his status is coming off that ACL. He probably wouldn't be ready for OTAs at this point and probably throughout the summer.
When did he tear that? When did he get hurt? I mean, it was like earlier in the season. So
was that like week 5? I want to say it was like week 5 or week 6.
I'll try to look it up here. Yeah, I know it was definitely earlier. It's not like it happened at the end of the year. Week 8. It looks like if Wikipedia is to be trusted. So would he be ready? I mean, I know ACLs guys come back quicker, but in terms of the spring work, I think it'd be a tough ask. It
would. I mean, it's a new system he'd have to learn. It is hopefully play action heavy. He tends to play well in a play action offense, but yeah, that's not the guy that I would target in this free agent crop of quarterbacks simply because of the turnover tendencies. I mean, the guy takes chances, and I know some people love that with quarterbacks. You got to be a gunslinger, but that guy consistently throughout his career has absolutely killed drives, killed games, just killed his team week after week, and that's not what they need at the position. But I mean, if it comes down to it and he can be the most affordable veteran quarterback they can get, I'd be okay with adding his name overall just to the mix.
Yeah. I know things were a lot better last year, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, but are you going to bet on those couple games as being the long-term thing, or is that just the anomaly situation? And there's a lot of fumbles too, dude. I'm looking at his numbers, 52 career fumbles, ton of interceptions, ton of sacks, just a lot of negativity in his play. And it's too much risk for me.
Yeah. And you put him behind a rebuilt offensive line. Like, people forget New Orleans offensive line was one of the best in the league. So like he wasn't under duress. He was able to make the right decisions. That probably won't be the case in Pittsburgh, at least in the 2022 season, with a rebuilt offensive line, a new offensive line coach, like we talked about. He makes a lot of boneheaded decisions, and the arm talent is there. Like there's no denying the physical traits with that guy, but he just throughout his career has shown that he'll kill you more times than help you in a sense within games. And that's not the type of quarterback the Steelers need, especially with the way that they seem to be building right now.
Is there a free agent quarterback that you've circled that you would be interested in? Is there one name that's kind of above the rest in your mind and your hopes?
Yeah, the one name that I really circled early in the year when it felt like, okay, this is it for Ben, and Tomlin kept preaching his mobility, is Tyrod Taylor. Virginia guy, him and Tomlin, from what I know, have a friendly relationship on the offseason. He would certainly bring the mobility and the veteran leadership to the position. Durability is certainly a concern. I mean, the poor guy, not his fault, punctured a lung in LA due to a medical issue.
Mm-hmm. It was a doctor that shot him wrong before pregame. That's what led to Justin Herbert starting in rest of history. So wild.
And then he pulled a hamstring, I think, in week 3 in Houston and missed a bunch of time and let Davis Mills shine and ultimately lost the job to Davis Mills. But it just feels like anywhere Tyrod goes, he's the placeholder for the next guy. He was in Cleveland before Baker. Yep. Obviously in LA, as you mentioned before, Justin Herbert. I think even he was in Buffalo before Josh Allen. So this guy can kind of be the bridge to the next guy at the position. He's just a smart football player. He's not going to turn the football over. He's also not going to take many chances downfield. So it could fit in that ball control, run heavy style that the Steelers kind of want to play and lean on your defense at times. That's the guy I have circled, but I did mention earlier Jacoby Brissett just because of the NC State ties and the guys on the offensive staff at this point.
Yeah, I think Taylor's a good suggestion. I know Dave and I have touched on him briefly as well, and you'll probably hear more about him as we get close to free agency because he does seem like that ultimate bridge quarterback who's mobile, who's smart, a good leader. There is kind of a little bit of connection there with Mike Tomlin, so that makes sense. The injuries are the big concern, but if you have Mason Rudolph as your backup in that scenario, then you have a reliable spot starter who can start for a game or two and run your offense. So if you didn't have that quality backup in that respect, it might make you more scared to go with Taylor because you're probably going to have to go to plan B at some point in the season. Same thing with Marcus Mariota, a guy who's had some injury issues as well. And so I think because you have Rudolph there, it's a more tolerable situation. And even if they sign Taylor, there's no guarantee. Like Tyrod Taylor's not going to come in as your slam dunk starter. There'd be a competition there. Of course, you could draft a quarterback as well. So that job probably wouldn't be handed to Tyrod Taylor or Marcus Mariota either.
Right. Yeah. So. And the good thing about those guys, I don't think they're really going to break the bank. I mean, 8 to 10 million max. I think Taylor signed for 8 million this year with Houston and probably is going to get right around that on the free agent market again, just due to the injuries that he dealt with this past year. But that's the guy that I have circled. I am certainly concerned with the injury history. I mean, it's never fun to look at a quarterback missing that many games due to soft tissue injuries, but he's just the guy that feels like he fits and is going to check a lot of boxes that the Steelers are looking for at the position right now. Yeah.
Let me ask you one last question here, Josh. In the ESPN article, they said JuJu going to Philadelphia. I won't make you pick the team where he's going to go, but do you think JuJu leaves or does he return?
I think he ultimately leaves. I do think that he realizes this is going to be a transition period and he needs to go get as much money as he possibly can. And even if it's a 1-year deal, he needs to land somewhere where there's a good quarterback in place. The Eagles is interesting, though. I mean, they certainly need help at the receiver position, but I don't know that he'd be thrilled catching footballs from Jalen Hurts compared to turning down a Mahomes or a Herbert, because he's been linked to the Chargers at this point. But I do think he ultimately leaves. I lean towards him getting a multi-year deal now that we're further removed from the cap crunch that the pandemic initially caused. But he is coming off of an injury-plagued season that I think he played just 5 games, was it? So that could
him coming back for that wildcard game is important, but
I think it's going to significantly help him on the market. Yeah. Teams are going to realize how tough he is, how team first oriented he is. I think he gets a multi-year deal somewhere, and it'll be a sad day when he leaves Pittsburgh.
I think he could, but if you're JuJu, why would you want to take that multi-year deal? Because the money's not going to be great. The cap will go up, I think, even more, because I think next year is kind of when the new TV deal comes in. The cap really is going to explode. So bet on yourself this year, 1-year deal. I know it sucks for a player because there is uncertainty there. He went through it this year and got hurt and saw the downside of that. But if I'm JuJu, unless the money's really good, I'm taking a 1-year deal. I'm not locking myself long-term for a fairly low amount of money because he's going to get, like 8 to 10 million at most, and it might be less than that. So you're going to lock yourselves in 2 years, 15, 16 million, and when you could get, 14 million a year from now, I just think it's a risky play.
No, that's totally fair point. I'm just wondering if he realizes look, he's dealt with injuries, didn't get what he wanted on the market last year. Take a 2-year bridge deal for $16-17 million, make it pay off. At that point, I think he'll only be 27 or 28 years old. So he still has plenty of time to really cash in if he lands in the right situation. I'm rooting for the guy. He's a good kid. He played his butt off here, and I just wish he got the respect that he deserved from most of the fan base. But I do see him playing elsewhere in 2022.
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning as well. I don't know what teams it's going to be. Dallas, Kansas City, somewhere else that comes out. I don't know.
I just hope it's not the AFC because I don't want it to be the AFC. I'd like to see him go to the NFC because one, I don't want to have to deal with him because I don't know that we have anyone that can really cover him. The Steelers have anyone in the slot that can cover him. But yeah, I couldn't tell you the team. I just hope it's not Baltimore. I think that would be very painful.
I don't think it'll be Baltimore. I don't think he's going to go to a run-heavy offense like that. Yeah. Maybe, but my guess is no.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, any other thoughts? Anything else here you wanted to discuss before we get out of here?
I wanted to bring up, did you see the PFF top 200 free agency rankings today?
Yeah, I went through I saw the article that you had written and just kind of combed through it.
I'll tell you what, for a year that is kind of a rebuild, the Steelers could find some value there in the tier 3 or tier 4 free agents. There's a lot of guys. The one name that stuck out to me, Alex, and I think you talked about him a lot in the draft year, was Bilal Nichols. That kind of that depth 3-4 defensive end. There's plenty of pass rushers they could get, but it feels like it's a year where the Steelers could lose a lot of free agents and kind of just swap them out like a 1-for-1 trade. It's not like they're going to lose anyone of significance aside from maybe a JuJu Smith-Schuster. But yeah, a lot of guys that are low on that ranking that feel like good value signings. The one thing that caught my attention in that rankings though, Alex, PFF has Trai Turner projected for a 3-year, $18.75 million deal with more than $10 million guaranteed, which that raised some eyebrows because he had an up and down year here in Pittsburgh this past year. And I know he's still relatively young, does have some good tape in recent seasons, but that's a large contract. And every other Steeler, I think, aside from Turner and Edmonds, was projected 1-year deals elsewhere. So very, very interesting. I do think the Steelers will be a little more active in free agency than in years past, kind of signing those fringe roster guys in a sense. But it just doesn't feel like they're going to be players for the big guys.
Yeah. Would you bring back Trai Turner, or are you letting them go?
On a 1-year deal, I certainly would. I wouldn't hand him the starting job. I think I would let him battle it out with, another free agent signing or a draft pick. But I would not lock myself into a 3-year deal with that much guaranteed for Trai Turner at this point.
Same. I think his play was better than what some Steelers fans think, but I think I would let him go because, again, if you want big, significant changes, you're going to have to make some significant changes along this offensive line, and bringing those guys back isn't going to produce those results.
Yeah, he did a nice job jumping on that moving train in a sense in the middle of the summer. Kind of stepped into that leadership role along the offensive line, a young offensive line, but I think he can be upgraded, and I would like to see the Steelers take a swing at trying to upgrade that right guard position rather than sticking with a status quo in a sense.
Yeah, so good article there. There was a good list of free agents, and we'll talk about that a lot more because free agency is about a month away, and so it'll be here.
That's crazy.
Before you know it, for sure. So, Josh, thank you so much for filling in with Dave again. Maybe we'll do a show for Friday, or maybe we'll definitely do something next week, obviously. But we'll just kind of play it by ear, see what the news cycle brings us. But wanted to talk about the new O-line hire and get some of those other topics covered as well. So appreciate it, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you need me.
All right, so I'm bad at outros. I've never had to do an outro before, so we'll see how this goes. And apologize, no reader emails either. We'll do those whenever Dave comes back. So I should have prepared the outro better. So this is going to be, I think, poorly done here. So I apologize in advance. But be sure to follow Josh on Twitter at Josh Carney. Be sure to follow Dave Bryan on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow myself on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Be sure to check out the site. We'll have a lot of great content here over the next couple of days. And again, give that Pat Meyer article or read for Steeler fans who want to know more about the new offensive line coach. It's going to bring in a good deal of information about who he is. So appreciate you guys. Again, I'm so bad at these outros. I'm trying to think how Dave ends it. I can't remember. He's done it so many times, but I always forget. But I appreciate you guys listening, and we'll talk to you soon.